But I'm happy to be here, happy to be talking to you. And this is a topic that is very close to both of our hearts. Where to begin, really? Maybe we should just start talking about control in general, because, yeah, I was thinking about growing up and being in this part of the world and this patriarchal society where so often we're taught to think about control as actually a really positive thing, like discipline and drive and structure, all of these like hardcore masculine traits that are put on a pedestal, but in reality it's a mask for fear. What is your experience been like with control, fear,
Yeah,
confronting those parts of yourself straight in?
let's go straight in, no time to waste. I was actually in preparation for this, just doing that, what has been my relationship with control. And the first time it came to me on a conscious level was uni. I was in my third year and we had to do a presentation. And I remember getting the presentation ready and needing audio visual. So the tech department to come in and set up some kind of equipment for me. And I remember in the end, I didn't need it. But then I was panicking. Oh, I booked this and now I need to unbook it. And one of the students, he was a lot mature, a lot older than me. And he was like, you just want to control everything. And that was the first time someone reflected back what control means. And for me, growing up, it was about wanting to control situations in terms of what I'm going to say to who, and like when someone's talking to me, how I'm going to respond even before the interactions happened, and try to control the entire setup, whether it's a presentation or whether it's just going out for a night. I just always wanted to have control. And I'd forgotten about it until preparing for this. But that was my wake up call. And now everything that I know from my study of depth psychology, I've realized that control was a survival mechanism, a safety mechanism. We talk about ego and ego loss, the possibility of ego loss working with Bufo. But the ego, I always say, is so important. We need the ego, but we need a healthy ego. But the challenge or the problem we have is the unhealthy expression of the ego is at play most of the time. So if the ego gets inflated, it thinks, we think, or I would think, if my ego's in inflation, I am better than others. If my ego is in deflation, it thinks others are better than me. So we always want to get into balance. But this concept of the ego, when we're born, we have these needs to be fed, to be kept warm, to be hugged. If we poo, we cry, and our needs are met automatically. Hopefully, our primary caregivers um, get those primary needs met. But as we grow older, the two sides is one, we want safety, and then the other is to be seen. And how we find that safety and how we find that being seen. Um, so another way is to protect ourselves or to promote ourselves. And we develop habits. So if the home environment for me was volatile, I was the youngest, and I have those needs. If my mum was unstable, it would be a threat to my needs being met. So I developed habits of shying away. Like keep hiding my needs, because if my needs came up and it caused volatility to my mom, then I might not get those needs met. Now I know other people who would find love through being good or being a perfectionist, will get that attention to be seen. And so those behaviors we learn become our way of being into adulthood. And this is where control lies, because that's become the familiar. And then anytime we venture into something different, like this guy then all of a sudden tells me it's all about control, it's an unknown world for me. How do I navigate that? And so, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because ultimately the ego is just trying to keep us safe. It's just using the strategies that we designed in childhood, and whether you had the most stable childhood or the most volatile childhood, that's how it forms, and the narratives it creates around what it is that you need to do to get your needs met. So it's really existential, this issue of control, but it becomes so insidious in the way that it becomes projected onto every other area of our life. And I love that you mentioned the kind of rehearsing conversations in your head, because I'd certainly had experienced that for, I thought that was just the way people were before psychedelics. I thought that that's just how we lived as human beings before we did anything, that our mind would, okay, and then if that person says this, then I'm going to say this thing. And yeah, I had this moment this morning when I was running with Rocco and on the heath, and just the experience of like a completely vacant head just running, and it's almost like, feels like you're in a simulation, or yeah, a video game, when that that sound is just not there. And it's certainly not like that 24 hours of the day, but to experience that is really what most people access through the Bufo realm, is the temporary dissolution of that narrating voice that is ultimately just trying to keep you safe, but becomes so maladaptive. And to experience life beyond it then gives you this beautiful frame for what it would be like just to allow things to unfold, to just move from moment to moment, trusting in the great unfolding of this experience. And it's so rich and beautiful, and so far beyond anything our minds could conceive or project. I guess another topic that I wanted to touch on, because it comes up a lot, is one of the most challenging things for people to do with these journeys is to let go of control. Do you want to talk a bit about Bufo specifically, and how it can help people with that surrender just through its sheer
yeah,
surrender?
yes. I Before I go on to Bufo, just like I remember the first time I ever took any psychedelics, it was with mushrooms. And with mushrooms, it can take 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour for the effects after you've drunk the medicine. And I remember as it was taking effect, I was lying down and I was literally trying to hold on to the wall, hold on to the bed, like hold on to everything. And that was a metaphor for the mind wanting to stay. And the person I was working with before taking the medicine said, you might need this one mantra: let go and let God. And I remembered that as I was physically trying to hold on. And I'm like, letting go and let God, let go and let God. And I began talking to the mushrooms. I'm like, okay, great, I'm here. I trust you. And then I could literally let go and surrender. And that was a great reference point for me. So when I then do Bufo and I inhale it, it's seconds. There's no time to think. I'm down and I'm in this realm, and every take that I had was the same. There was no in between of thinking about, is it going to kick in, or have I done this right, or have I done it? And so the two are very different. And other medicines like ayahuasca, for example, can take 45 minutes, an hour. You might need a second cup before something starts happening. But the experience with Bufo was seconds, and it just takes you to that realm which words can't describe. And so the experience from a Bufo perspective, one, it's the speed. I don't know how the serotonin or whatever chemicals are going on There's talk about the default mode network. It just kind of goes from there to there. What was it like for you?
Yeah, I think unconsciously there was a fear that's probably relatable for a lot of people of like, if I let go, like this is an existentially threatening situation, like to just loosen my grip on reality and float off into the domain. And so there was probably a projection that it would be much harder than it was, but it was so like heavenly and delicious that it felt so warm and safe and inviting, and not like a threat to my ego. Maybe because my ego just wasn't even there in the room. But yeah, no space, no time, just sitting upright, took the inhalation of the Bufo, and then just my body melted backwards, and all I saw was like white light and these kind of shapes, and the feeling was just, yeah, like touching the divine. And I think going back a bit, my own journey with control has been like really, my biggest struggles were with my body and with food, and like having a long history of eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, and constantly at war with my body. And really it did come down to control, like this desire to be something other than what I was, and so trapped in like these vicious cycles of restricting, binging, losing weight, gaining weight. And it was just like a fixation. In a way it was a superficial fixation, something to distract from the pain that I was feeling inside. And I tried loads of conventional things like cognitive behavioral therapy, talking therapy, antidepressants, and there was just so much fear and terror at what it would be like to let that go and have to look at what was actually going on underneath that. And as women, like our bodies are constantly in a state of flux, and it is an act of violence towards ourselves to not just be in love and accept where we are in that process. And yeah, to be able to experience what it was like just for none of that to exist, none of that noise to exist. It's funny because we were talking about the weight loss jabs, and people talking about, oh, it just turns off the food noise, and that's why they're so popular, because it can turn off food noise. And I was like, before it turns off all the noise, everything. There's just nothing going on upstairs, and you can't argue with that being a deeply healing process, to see what's beyond the BS that our monkey mind is just rattling out every hour of the day.
Yeah, there's so many angles we can take this. I don't want to lose focus, but as you were sharing the your body, the relationship with your body and food, and the internal challenges that you were going through from an external um, patriarchy, the system puts so much judgment on women and girls and their body, and so it's from multiple angles that the work is happening, on the collective as well as on the individual level.
Yeah, yeah, and a widespread disconnection of women from their bodies, from their intuition, from their connection to nature, because all of that requires letting go of control, because it's intuitive, it's not strategic planning thought through, it's the divine pings, the cosmic pings that are flowing through us. And until we let go of control, we cannot access our brilliance, our magic, and do what it is that we're here to do on this earth. Because our feminine power doesn't work in the masculine patriarchal way. Like, we're having this conversation. I've no idea what my next sentence is going to be, Mo, and that's exactly as it's meant to be.
Yeah, 100%. And it's amazing because the version of me would have needed to know what we're talking about and have have scripts. But to go from that version to this version and is it's the power of this work. And just that control is in the mind, and we do have this the mind body soul split where we are in our heads all the time. And so when we do take medicines such as mushrooms or ayahuasca, where it takes longer for the medicine to kick in, we have space and time to talk in that internal narrative to go on and to not drop into the body. And then the next layer is dropping into the soul, or allowing yourself to reach the spirit realms, which is where Bufo can take us.
Yeah, yeah, it's so powerful. I shared a bit about like the cost very much from a woman's perspective of not letting go, not surrendering, and how that disconnects us from our purpose, our gifts, what it is that we're here to do. But I'm interested in a broader sense as well about just this, the cost of control, I guess. I can imagine a lot of people who are holding on very tightly and rigidly, living their lives in these arbitrary control everything and then I feel safe. Well, yeah, I'm controlling everything and it is feeling safe. Like, what is the long term cost of just living your life like that?
Oof. Physically, it can harm our health in, on one level. Practically, to be in that space of control is the unhealthy expression of the masculine, and we're cut off from our emotions, so become emotionally unavailable. So our relationships will suffer, won't be as nourishing and fulfilling as they can be. Our work, so if I'm a manager and I'm trying to control everybody, what dynamic will that have on my staff? So it can impact all areas of relationships, professional, the way our health is. We ignore the signs of the body because we're detached from the emotions and the feelings, that split between mind body. Um, just some that come to mind.
Yeah, relationships is so big as well. I was thinking more about romantic relationships, and like the ultimate surrender is to be with the uncertainty, to open your heart to another human being. And like, if you want to be in control, you're sort of by default destined to either be alone or in to keep others at arm's length in unsatisfying relationships. And it's mad because I think people do live their whole lives like this, not realizing like the depth of connection and intimacy that's available through that total surrender into love.
Yeah, it's sad because you see people in unhealthy relationships where there's fear on both sides. So there might be fear on the controlling person to control the other, and the other person's scared to leave. And they're both playing out a script that we started off talking about, we learn from when we're little, from childhood, and those scripts continue to play out.
Yeah, thank you so much Mo, I think we'll leave it there for today. Wait, was there anything else you desperately wanted to share on this topic? I feel like we could do a deep dive on all 7 of the things we've talked about.
Yeah, there's always lots to talk about. I guess when it comes to control and Bufo, there is preparation. um the training that we share, we do a lot of that letting go, dropping out of the headspace and inviting people to tap into their feelings. And so one of the challenges, we have our comfort zone, our safety zone. That's where control lies. And there is an overwhelm zone where we can collapse, and that can be painful. But there's an in between zone, which I call the learning zone. And so, how do we move from the known safe world to stretch beyond our comfort zone and invite more, invite more of that, the feeling of the discomfort? And so the training that we have is there to prepare people so that when they're meeting the medicine, they're in the vessel, if you like, is tuned in, it's clear, it's clean. So that's something to to put, yeah, to be aware of.
Yes, definitely. You do need to psychologically prepare for that kind of intense, powerful experience. Okay, thank you so much, Mo. We'll be back here next week for another riveting discussion, which we'll decide 5 minutes beforehand in the spirit of letting go of control. A pleasure to speak to you. We'll be heading out to Portugal at the end of July to do a beautiful 5-day retreat with Bufo. If this feels like something that you're struggling with, then there's a link in the bio to apply.